My name is Morgan Ingram. I'm 17 years old, and 3 months ago, my life was condensed into a single sheet of yellow highlighted paper sitting on a stained oak kitchen table. My stepmother, Valerie, sat across from me, sipping coffee from a mug that used to belong to my mother. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like a tired suburban mom in a Lululemon headband, but when she pushed those papers toward me, her eyes were as cold as a flattened nickel. "Sign it, Morgan," she said. Her voice was airy, like she was asking me to pass the salt. "It's a petition for guardianship of your mother's estate. It's the only way to keep this family afloat. The roof is leaking, Briana needs tuition, and let's be honest, you're 17. You don't know the first thing about managing $400,000. I looked past her at my father, Richard. He was standing by the refrigerator, his arms crossed over his chest, staring at a spot on the floor. He didn't look at me. He hadn't really looked at me since the funeral. "She's your family now, Morgan," his voice rehearsed and hollow. "Your mother was a practical woman. She would have wanted this money to go toward the home you're living in. She would have wanted us to stay together." I didn't argue. I didn't point out that my mother spent her last 2 years of life fighting cancer, while my father spent those same years forgetting to pay child support. I didn't mention that Valerie had already moved my mother's heirloom dresser into the garage to make room for a gaming nook for her son. I said nothing. I just picked up the papers, went to my room, which was actually a converted storage closet at the end of the hall, and locked the door. The next morning, I didn't hand them a signed petition. I handed them a heavy, cream-colored envelope with a law firm seal on the back. When my father read the letter inside, he did something I'd never seen him do in 17 years. He sat down on the kitchen floor and cried. Not because of the money, but because of what my mother wrote about him. Words she'd kept sealed for years, waiting for the exact moment he'd tried to betray her daughter. Before we get into the contents of that letter and the legal trap my mother set from her deathbed, do me a favor. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own house, or if you've had to protect a legacy from people who didn't earn it, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment with your location and your local time. I want to know who's listening to this confession tonight. Let's go back to the Tuesday my world stopped. My mother, Claire, was 43. She was a 4th grade teacher who lived for construction paper and red pens. She was the kind of woman who bought extra winter coats for her students and never told anyone. When the stage 3 lung cancer came, she didn't ask, "Why me?" She just looked at her legal pad and said, "Okay, let's make a plan." For 23 months, she fought. Chemo on Thursdays, grading papers on Fridays, and sitting with me on Saturdays to talk about my future. By the last week, she could barely whisper. She pulled me close, her hand feeling like a bundle of dry twigs, and said, "Morgan, everything you need is with Drayton. Promise me you'll call her." I didn't know who Drayton was. I thought she was a palliative care nurse. I just held her hand and said, "I promise, Mom." She died on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was out, mocking the silence in the room. I was the only one there. My father hadn't visited once. Not when she lost her hair, not when we had to sell our childhood home to pay the deductibles, not once. He sent a text the next day, "Sorry for your loss." 5 words for the woman he'd been married to for 12 years. Because I was a minor, the state of Virginia said I had to go to my biological father. My Aunt June tried to fight for me, but Richard had legal priority, so I packed 2 suitcases and moved into his house in Grover. It was a full house, Richard, Valerie, and her 2 kids. I was the +1. My room was that storage space at the end of the hall, a camp cot, a folding table, and a bare bulb. My suitcases didn't even fit. I had to stack them in the corner like trash. That first night, I heard Valerie in the kitchen. She wasn't talking about grief, she was talking about the trust. How long until the paperwork clears? If we get that $400,000, we can finally fix the Honda and put Briana in that private prep school. It's only fair, Richard. We're the ones raising her now. I pulled my mother's old wool blanket over my head. I didn't cry. My mother taught me better than that. She taught me that when people tell you who they are, you should believe them the first time. I sat in that dark closet and opened the small wooden box I'd brought from home. Inside were her reading glasses, a card from my 15th birthday, and a folded piece of paper with a number. Patricia Drayton, Esquire. I didn't call her that night. I wanted to give my father a chance to be the man my mother once thought he was. But 2 weeks later, when Valerie served everyone chicken casserole and forgot to give me a plate until I asked, I knew that chance was gone. "Morgan," my father said that evening, his voice dripping with that fake, concerned parent tone, "we need to talk about your mother's money. It's not safe for a girl your age to have that kind of wealth hanging over her head. We should consolidate it into the family account." I looked at Valerie, who was smiling at me over the rim of her wineglass. It was the smile of a predator who had already picked out which part of the kill she wanted first. "It's in an irrevocable trust," I said quietly. Valerie's smile flickered. "Trusts can be broken, sweetie. We looked it up." That was the moment I realized they hadn't just been waiting for me to move in. They had been auditing my mother's death before her body was even cold. To understand why that $400,000 mattered so much, you have to understand the math of my mother's life. Claire Ingram didn't make six figures. She was a teacher, but she was a teacher who understood that security is something you build brick by brick when no one is watching. When my father walked out on us 6 years ago to marry Valerie, my mother didn't fall apart. She bought a smaller house, upped her life insurance policy, and started a savings account she labeled Morgan's Floor. She used to tell me, "A woman needs a floor, Morgan, because the world will try to pull the rug out from under you every chance it gets." The $400,000 wasn't just a number. It was $250,000 from her life insurance, $95,000 from decades of teaching savings, and $55,000 from the sale of our home. She'd sold the house 6 months before she died, telling me we were downsizing for simplicity. I realize now she was liquidating her life so it could be moved into a vault where my father couldn't find it. The week after the casserole dinner, the pressure became a physical weight. Valerie started forgetting to do my laundry. My stepbrother Kyle accidentally tipped a glass of water onto my school journals. It was a war of attrition. They wanted to make my life so miserable that I would sign anything just to have a peaceful breakfast. On Wednesday, I went to the public library. It was the only place I could find silence. I sat in the back room and called the number. "Drayton Law Offices," a sharp, professional voice answered. "My name is Morgan Ingram. My mother was Claire Ingram. She told me to call you." There was a long pause. I heard the sound of a heavy file being pulled from a cabinet. "Morgan," Patricia Drayton said, her voice softening. "I've been waiting for this call. Your mother told me you'd be reaching out right about now." "Right about now?" I asked. "She said to give your father exactly 14 days. She said that's how long it would take for the family talk to turn into the money talk. Was she right?" I felt a chill run down my spine. My mother was ghostwriting my life from the grave. "She was exactly right," I said. "They're filing for guardianship of the estate on Monday." "Let them file," Drayton said. "I have a thick folder here, Morgan. Your mother spent her last year of life building a fortress around you. She didn't hope for the best, she planned for the worst. Can you get to my office on Saturday?" When I got home that evening, I found a black trash bag sitting on the concrete floor of the garage. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. It was my mother's things, her favorite coffee mug, her photo albums, her jewelry box. Valerie had cleared out the storage closet to make room for Kyle's new TV. "We needed the space, Morgan," Valerie said, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. "You can keep that junk in the garage, or better yet, donate it. You need to stop living in the past and start contributing to the future of this house." I reached into the bag and pulled out a thin silver bracelet. It was a simple chain with a tiny locket. Inside was a photo of me at age 4. The photo was damp. Something had leaked on it in the bag. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just put the bracelet on my wrist and felt the metal snap shut. "You can take the room," I said, my voice so steady it surprised even me. "You can take the chair at the table, but you don't get to throw my mother in the trash." Valerie laughed, a short, ugly sound. "And what are you going to do about it, little girl? You're a minor. You're under our roof. You'll do what we tell you, or you can find out how fast a 17-year-old gets picked up by CPS." I walked past her into the house. My father had seen Valerie put my mother's life in a trash bag. He'd watched her do it while he was loading the dishwasher. He hadn't said a word. "Weakness," my mother had written in an old journal, "is just as dangerous as cruelty." I realized then that I wasn't just fighting Valerie, I was fighting the man who was supposed to be my protector. On Saturday morning, I took the bus 2 towns over. Patricia Drayton's office was above a hardware store. It smelled of old paper and peppermint. Patricia herself was a force of nature. Silver hair, sharp glasses, and a suit that cost more than my father's car. "Sit down, Morgan," she said, sliding a thick blue folder across the desk. "We have a lot to talk about. Your mother and I spent 18 months on this. She knew Richard, she knew his type, and she knew exactly what Valerie would try to do." She opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a photocopy of a bank inquiry. "Your stepmother already tried to call the bank," Drayton said, 3 days ago. "She tried to identify herself as your legal guardian to get a balance summary. The bank denied her, of course, because of the way your mother structured the trust, but it's good to have the evidence of the attempt." "She's already trying to steal it?" I asked, heartbroken. "She's trying to manage it," she corrected with a grim smile. But she forgot one thing. Claire Ingram was a teacher, and teachers always keep receipts. She handed me a heavy, cream-colored envelope. "For Richard when the time comes." "The time is Tuesday, Morgan. That's when their guardianship hearing is scheduled. I want you to give this to him on Monday night, not before. Let him go to sleep thinking he's won, and then give him the truth." They say a home is a sanctuary. But when you're 17 and living in a converted storage closet, a home is just a series of rooms you aren't allowed to occupy. My room at the end of the hall was less than 80 square feet. It was the place where the vacuum cleaner and the holiday decorations used to live before I became the new inconvenient item to store. The walls were thin drywall that didn't quite reach the ceiling, meaning I was an unwilling audience to the life of the real family. I could hear Valerie's daughter Briana laughing on FaceTime in the next room, complaining about her tiny closet that was 3 times the size of my entire living space. I could hear Kyle's video games thumping through the floorboards, but mostly I heard the silence of my father. That silence was a choice. Every time Valerie made a comment about my attitude or the drain on the grocery budget, my father's silence was his signature on her behavior. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home from my shift at the library to find the door to my storage room wide open. Kyle and 2 of his friends were inside. They weren't just in there, they were raiding. My mother's wooden box, the one I kept under my camp cot, was open on the folding table. Kyle was holding her old reading glasses, wearing them crooked on his face while his friends filmed him for a TikTok. "Look at me," Kyle mocked, squinting at the camera. "I'm a dead teacher. I'm grading your soul. F- for everyone." The boys erupted in laughter. I stood in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Put them back, Kyle," I said. My voice was low, vibrating with a frequency I didn't even recognize. Kyle didn't flinch. He was 14, fueled by his mother's entitlement and the knowledge that I was the charity case. "Relax, Morgan. We were just looking for the money. Mom says you're hiding a fortune in here. Where is it? Is it in the socks? The old journals?" He tossed the glasses onto the cot. They hit the metal frame with a sickening crack. One of the lenses spiderwebbed. The world went white for a second. I didn't scream. I didn't charge at him. I just walked over, picked up the broken glasses, and tucked them into my pocket. "Get out," I said. "Or what? You gonna tell your dad? He doesn't care, Morgan. He's the one who gave me the key to this room so I could check the insulation." He pushed past me, his shoulder hitting mine, his friends snickering as they recorded the whole thing. I stood in the center of that 80 square foot box and realized they weren't checking the insulation. They were checking my limits. They were trying to see how much of my mother's memory they could break before I snapped. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table. Valerie was serving pot roast. She gave Briana the best cut, Kyle a double helping, and my father a silent nod. When she got to me, she scraped the bottom of the pan, landing a piece of gristle and a single potato on my plate. "So, Morgan," Valerie said, wiping her mouth with a silk napkin, "the lawyer called today. Our lawyer. We've finalized the petition for the guardianship hearing. It's set for Tuesday morning at the county courthouse." My father finally looked up. His eyes were tired. "It's for the best, honey. We'll pay off the house, get the roof fixed, and put the rest in a high-yield account for your college. It's what Claire would have wanted, to see us all secure." "How would you know what she wanted, Dad?" I asked. "You haven't seen her in 2 years. You didn't even know her favorite color by the time she died." The table went vacuum sealed. Valerie's fork hit the porcelain with a sharp clack. "Don't you dare talk to your father that way," she hissed. "We are the only reason you aren't in a group home right now. You're a minor with a bank account you don't deserve. We are doing you a favor by stepping in." "A $400,000 favor?" I asked. "It's about the family, Morgan," Richard shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We're drowning. Do you have any idea what the mortgage is on this place? Do you know what Brianna's tuition costs? You're sitting on a mountain of cash while we're gasping for air." "It's not my money, Dad. It's Mom's, and she didn't leave it to the family. She left it to me." "You're 17. You don't own anything. On Tuesday, a judge is going to agree that you're incapable of managing these funds, and then we're going to fix this mess once and for all." I stood up. I didn't finish the gristle. I didn't wash my plate. "I have a meeting on Monday." I went back to my room and pulled the cream-colored envelope out from behind the loose baseboard where I'd hidden it. "For Richard when the time comes." I ran my thumb over my mother's handwriting. I could almost hear her voice, the calm, classroom-ready tone she used when a student was being difficult. "Wait for the moment, Morgan. Let them show their hand first." They had shown it. They'd broken her glasses, they'd insulted her career, they'd tried to weaponize my grief to pay for a life they couldn't afford. That night, I didn't sleep on the cot. I sat on the floor, leaning against my suitcases, and wrote a letter of my own to Patricia Drayton. I told her about the glasses. I told her about the insulation check. I told her that my father wasn't the man she remembered from 10 years ago. The next morning was Sunday. I went into the kitchen to get a glass of water and found my father sitting alone, staring at a photo of my mother he'd taken out of the trash bag in the garage. He looked up at me, his face crumbling for a split second. "She really loved those kids at that school, didn't she?" She loved everyone, Dad. She just stopped trusting you. He flinched. He put the photo face down on the table. Tuesday morning, Morgan. Be ready by 8 a.m. We're going to the courthouse as a family. I'll be ready, I said. I went back to my closet and started packing. Not just my suitcases, but the trash bags. Every photo, every scrap of my mother's life. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't staying here past Tuesday. Because I knew something they didn't. My mother didn't just leave me money, she left me a weapon. And on Monday night, I was going to pull the pin.
Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. In the house in Grover, the air was thick with a triumphant energy that made my skin crawl. Valerie was humming in the kitchen, packing a leather briefcase with evidence of my supposed inability to manage my life. She'd spent the weekend printing out my Amazon history and a few low grades from the semester my mother was dying, as if grief were a synonym for incompetence. "Big day tomorrow, Morgan," she said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Once the judge signs off, we can finally get this family's finances on a healthy track. You'll thank us when you're older." I didn't answer. I just adjusted my mother's silver bracelet and walked out the door. But I wasn't going to school. I was taking the bus to Culpeper to see Patricia Drayton for the pre-hearing briefing. Drayton's office was quiet, save for the rhythmic thunk-thunk of a date stamper. When I walked in, she didn't offer me tea or small talk. She pointed to the heavy blue folder on her desk. "Your father's lawyer called me an hour ago, Morgan," she said, her voice like a velvet hammer. "He's very confident. He thinks because you're 17 and living under Richard's roof, this is a slam dunk. He thinks he's walking into a probate court to claim a prize." "And is he actually walking into?" I asked. Drayton leaned back, her silver hair catching the light. "He's walking into a buzzsaw. Your mother didn't just write a will, Morgan. She created an irrevocable trust. Do you know the power of that word? Irrevocable." She flipped open the folder to a page covered in dense, terrifyingly precise legal jargon. "In the state of Virginia, a guardianship petition can grant a parent control over a minor's general assets, but an irrevocable trust is a separate legal entity. It has its own rules, its own gatekeeper, and its own fortress. Your mother named me as the sole trustee. Not Richard, not Valerie, me. So the judge can't give them the money tomorrow?" "The judge can't even touch the money," said Drayton with a grim smile. "Your mother inserted a spendthrift clause. It's a legal barrier that prevents greedy relatives from attaching themselves to the funds. Even if your father were appointed your guardian, he would have zero authority to withdraw a single penny without my signature, and I don't sign for leaky roofs or prep school tuitions." She pulled out a second document, a digital log from the bank. "And here is the final brick in the wall. Your stepmother called the bank again yesterday. She didn't just ask for a balance this time. She tried to reset the security questions. She claimed you had lost your access, and that she was authorized to recover the account. The bank recorded the call, Morgan. I have the audio file." I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. They weren't just waiting for the court. They were trying to hack my mother's legacy before the sun went down. "What do I do tonight?" I asked. Drayton reached into her drawer and pulled out a fresh copy of the cream-colored envelope. "Tonight, you give your father the letter, but you don't do it in front of Valerie. Your mother knew Richard's biggest flaw wasn't malice, it was a lack of spine. She wanted him to read her words without her wife's voice in his ear. She wanted him to remember who he was before he became a man who hides in his own house." I spent the afternoon at the library, looking at the broken glasses in my pocket. I thought about my mother, sitting in a sterile hospital room, spending her final bits of energy to outmaneuver a woman she'd never even met. She had been a teacher for 16 years. She knew how to handle bullies. You don't scream at them. You just make sure the rules are so absolute they have nowhere to run. I got back to the house at 6 p.m. The atmosphere was celebratory. Valerie had ordered expensive takeout, sushi and champagne. She was already talking about the contractors coming over on Wednesday to look at the kitchen remodel. "Sit down, Morgan," she chirped. "Let's have one last night of tension before we all become a real united family." I looked at my father. He was holding a glass of champagne, but he looked like he wanted to vomit. He was playing the part of the happy patriarch, but the costume didn't fit. "I'm not hungry," I said. "Dad, can I talk to you in the garage? I need help with one of the boxes." Valerie's eyes sharpened. "The boxes can wait until tomorrow, honey." "It's the box with Mom's books," I said, looking directly at my father. "It's heavy. I can't move it alone." Richard hesitated. He looked at Valerie, then at me. For a split second, a flicker of the old dad appeared in his eyes. "I'll be right back, Val," he said, setting his glass down. We walked out to the garage. The smell of oil and lawn clippings hit me. There, on the concrete floor, sat the black trash bags. My father looked at them and winced. "I'm sorry about the room, Morgan," he whispered, checking the door to make sure Valerie wasn't listening. "It's just, things are tight. We'll make it up to you, I promise." "You can't make up for a forged bank inquiry, Dad," I said. He froze. "What?" I didn't explain. I reached into my jacket and placed the cream-colored envelope on the hood of his truck. "Mom's lawyer gave me this. She said it was for you, for when you finally decided to choose Valerie's greed over my future. She wrote it 2 years ago. She knew exactly where we'd be standing tonight." "Morgan, I don't—" "Read it, Dad. Read it before you go back inside, because tomorrow morning when we walk into that courthouse, Patricia Drayton is going to play a recording of your wife trying to steal Mom's money, and then she's going to show the judge the trust documents that make your petition a joke." I turned toward the door, my hand on the knob. "Mom didn't hate you, Dad. She just knew you weren't strong enough to protect me. She was right. But the letter, that's her giving you one last chance to prove her wrong." I walked back into the house, leaving him alone in the dim light of the garage with the ghost of the woman he'd abandoned.
I didn't stay to watch him open it. I walked back into the kitchen, the fluorescent lights feeling like needles in my eyes. Valerie was still at the table, picking at a piece of yellowtail, her eyes darting to the garage door every 3 seconds. She was a woman who lived on control, and the 3 minutes Richard had spent alone with me were clearly making her itch. "What's taking him so long?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's a box of books, Morgan, not a grand piano." "He's just finding his footing," I said, taking a sip of water. My heart was a drum in my ears. "Don't get smart with me, not tonight. Tomorrow, everything changes. You'll be lucky if I let you keep that library job after the way you've behaved." I looked at her, the gold earrings, the expensive highlights, the silk blouse she'd probably bought on a credit card she expected me to pay off tomorrow. I felt a strange sense of pity for her. She had no idea that the investment she'd been grooming for months was actually a landmine. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Valerie stood up, her chair screeching against the tile. "That's it! Richard!" she yelled toward the garage. The door opened. My father didn't walk in, he drifted. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost and realized the ghost was him. He was holding the cream-colored paper in one hand. It was crumpled, the edges damp where his grip had been too tight. "Richard?" Valerie asked, her tone shifting to sharp suspicion. "What is that? What did she give you?" He didn't answer her. He looked at me. His eyes were red, the kind of raw, weeping red that comes from a wound you didn't know you had. "She knew," he whispered. His voice was a thread, barely holding together. "She knew exactly what you'd say to me, Richard. She even knew the chair I'd be sitting in when I stopped fighting for her." "What are you talking about?" Valerie snapped, reaching for the letter. "Give me that." Richard pulled his hand back. For the first time in 6 years, he didn't yield to her. He didn't even look at her. "She called me a coward, Val, but she said it so kindly it hurt worse than a punch. She said she couldn't make me into the father Morgan deserved, but she could make sure Morgan was okay without one." Valerie's face went through a terrifying transformation. The stepmom of the year mask shattered, leaving behind something sharp and jagged. "I don't care what that woman wrote. She's dead, and her money is the only thing keeping us from losing this roof. Give me the letter." She lunged for it, her manicured nails catching the edge of the paper. Richard didn't move. He let her snatch it. She scanned it, her eyes moving like a predator's. When she got to the part about her own greed, the part where my mother predicted Valerie would see an opportunity in her death, she didn't cry. She laughed, a short, ugly bark of a laugh. "So what? She was a bitter, dying woman who wanted to control you from the grave. This doesn't change anything, Richard. The hearing is at 8 a.m. We sign the papers, we get the money, and we forget this ever happened." "There is no money, Valerie," Richard said. He sounded tired, so impossibly tired. "What do you mean, no money? There's $400,000. "It's in an irrevocable trust," Richard said, the legal term sounding heavy and foreign in his mouth. "I talked to my brother, the accountant, tonight. A judge can't touch it, I can't touch it, and you certainly can't touch it." Valerie froze. "You talked to your brother? Without asking me?" "I'm the father, Valerie. At least, I'm trying to remember how to be one." Richard's voice finally broke, a roar that shook the champagne glasses on the table. "You tried to hack the bank. You lied to me about lost access. You made me a partner in a crime against my own daughter." "I did it for us," she screamed back. "For Briana, for Kyle, for this house." "No," Richard said, his voice dropping into a cold, terrifyingly quiet register.
You did it for the Audi. You did it for the highlights. You did it because you thought my daughter was a paycheck." He looked at me then, a look of such profound shame I had to turn away. "Morgan, I'm not going to the courthouse tomorrow. I'm calling the lawyer. I'm withdrawing the petition." "You do that," Valerie hissed, her voice vibrating with pure malice. "And I'm gone. I'm taking the kids, and I'm taking half of everything else. You'll be bankrupt in a month." Richard looked around the kitchen, at the expensive appliances, the silk napkins, the life he'd built on the bones of his first marriage. "Then I guess I'd better start packing," he said. He turned and walked toward the master bedroom. Valerie stood in the center of the kitchen, her chest heaving, her eyes fixed on me. "You think you've won. You just destroyed this family. You just made your father a homeless man. I hope that $400,000 keeps you warm at night." "It's not the money that keeps me warm, Valerie," I said, standing up and picking up my mother's broken glasses from the table. "I'm not making fun of you," I said, and pulled her into a hug. "I did understand how you felt. I meant the fact that Mom saw you coming 700 days ago. She knew you'd be standing right here, saying exactly that, and she made sure I didn't have to listen to you for 1 second longer than I wanted to." I walked to my storage closet. I didn't lock the door. I didn't have to anymore. The walls were still thin, and I could hear Valerie screaming in the hallway, the sound of glass breaking, and the frantic, hushed voices of her children. But for the first time in 3 months, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a girl with a floor. I sat on my camp cot and opened the bag with the photo of my mom. I ran my finger over her face. "We did it, Mom," I whispered. He read it. The house was a war zone that night, but for me, the battle was over.
The courthouse hearing on Tuesday never happened. My father withdrew the petition, and by Wednesday, Patricia Drayton had sent a formal cease and desist to Valerie regarding my mother's trust. But Valerie wasn't a woman who went down without a fight. If she couldn't win in a courtroom, she'd win in the court of public opinion. That Sunday, the Inquisition was held at Grandma Shirley's house. Shirley was my father's mother, a woman who believed that family was a rug large enough to hide any amount of dirt. The entire Ingram clan was there. The atmosphere in the dining room was like a funeral where the body was still breathing. Valerie had arrived early. By the time I walked in, the air was thick with her tragic stepmother routine. She was dabbing her eyes, her voice a fragile trill. "I just don't understand it," she was telling Aunt Linda. "We've opened our hearts to her, and now because of some bitter letter from a woman who couldn't keep her own marriage together, Morgan is letting us lose our house. It's heartless." My father was sitting in the corner, staring at a plate of untouched pot roast. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 days. "Hi, Grandma," I said, walking to the head of the table. Grandma didn't hug me. She set her fork down with a slow, deliberate clink. "Morgan, sit. Your stepmother has been telling us some very troubling things. Is that the way your mother raised you? To be a miser while your family drowns?" "My mother raised me to be careful, Grandma," I said, sliding into the seat directly across from Valerie. "She raised me to know the difference between a family and a collection agency." Valerie gasped, a sharp, theatrical sound. "See? This is the venom I deal with every day. Richard, tell them how she treats me." Richard didn't look up. He just gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "The money is in an irrevocable trust," I told the room. "Mom set it up 18 months before she died. She didn't do it to be mean. She did it because she knew exactly what would happen the moment she was gone. She knew Valerie would call the bank to try and hack the password. She knew someone would try to file for guardianship just for paying for a kitchen remodel." "That's a lie," Valerie shrieked, her face turning a furious red. "I never tried to hack anything." "I have the audio recordings, Valerie," I said, pulling my phone out, "and the bank logs. Patricia Drayton is keeping them for the police, just in case." The room went vacuum-sealed. Aunt Linda's eyes narrowed. Uncle Dean, the accountant, leaned forward, his interest suddenly piqued. "Is that true, Richard?" Shirley asked. "Did she try to take the money without telling you?" Richard finally looked up. He didn't look at his mother, he looked at Valerie. The look was one of pure, unadulterated exhaustion. "She did, Ma. She tried to reset the security questions behind my back. She's been auditing Claire's death since the day of the funeral." Valerie's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. "So what?" she spat, her voice dropping into a low, jagged snarl. "We're the ones doing the work. We're the ones feeding her. Why should a 17-year-old girl have $400,000 while I'm struggling to pay the visa bill?" "Because it's not your money, and I'm not your paycheck. You're a brat," Valerie screamed, standing up so fast her chair flipped over. "Richard, tell her she's out." The room waited. I waited.
Richard stood up. He looked at Valerie, at the expensive highlights, the gold jewelry, the woman he'd traded his first life for. Then he looked at me. He saw the silver bracelet. He saw the girl who had slept in a closet for 3 months without complaining once. "She's right, Val," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "She's the only one in this house who isn't lying, and she's not the one who's out." "What?" Valerie hissed. "I'm done, Valerie. I'm done fighting for a life I can't afford with a woman who doesn't respect my daughter's heritage. You want the house? Take it. You want the debt? It's yours. I'm moving out." Valerie looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but the Ingrams were a prideful people, and bank fraud was a bridge too far. Grandma Shirley turned her back on Valerie and reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Morgan," Shirley whispered. "We didn't know." "I know, Grandma. Everyone usually does." I walked out of that house with my head held high. Valerie was screaming in the driveway, a frantic, ugly sound that faded as I got into the car. I went to the library. I sat at my usual table by the window and pulled out my journal. I found a clean page. "Dear Mom," I wrote, "the fortress is holding, and for the first time in a long time, the air is starting to clear. Dad? Well, he's trying. I'm not sure if it's enough yet, but he's trying." The $400,000 was still there, safe behind the walls my mother had built. But as I watched the sun set, I realized the real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the fact that my mother had loved me enough to fight for me when she wasn't even there to hold my hand.
The fallout from the Inquisition at Grandma Shirley's didn't just linger, it solidified. In a small town like Grover, reputation is the only currency that matters once the bank accounts run dry. By Monday morning, Valerie's Stepmom of the Year trophy had been unceremoniously tossed into the social gutter. But a cornered predator is at its most dangerous when the exit is locked. I was in my storage closet on Tuesday afternoon, packing the last of my mother's books, when I heard the front door slam so hard the drywall shuddered. Then came the screaming. Valerie was back from a meeting with a divorce attorney, and apparently the news wasn't what she'd scripted. "You're leaving me with the debt?" she shrieked at my father in the hallway. "The mortgage is in both our names, Richard. You can't just walk away and leave me with a foreclosed house." "I'm leaving you with the house you insisted on mortgaging to the hilt, Valerie." My father's voice was flat, the sound of a man who had finally hit rock bottom and found it was made of concrete. "I'm taking my clothes and my truck. Everything else, the furniture you bought with Morgan's money, the Audi you couldn't afford, that's your problem now. I'll sue you. I'll tell the judge you're an unfit father." "Go ahead, but while you're at it, explain to the judge why you called the trust 4 times pretending to be a dead woman's daughter." The silence that followed was heavy and jagged. I stepped out into the hallway. Valerie was standing there, her hair disheveled, her expensive mascara running in dark streaks down her face. She looked at me and I saw pure, unadulterated hatred. "You," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "This is your fault. You and that ghost of a mother you worship. You could have saved this family with a single signature, and you chose to watch us burn." "I didn't watch you burn, Valerie," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I just stopped bringing the gasoline." The front door opened before she could respond. It was Patricia Drayton. She wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. Drayton didn't knock. She walked in with the authority of someone who owned the air she breathed. "Mrs. Ingram, Mr. Ingram, I apologize for the intrusion, but there are some final notifications that require your immediate attention." Valerie tried to summon a shred of her former dignity. "We're in the middle of a private family matter, Patricia. Get out." "This is the matter," Drayton replied, stepping into the living room. She gestured for the man to open his briefcase. "This is Mr. Holloway. He represents the forensic accounting firm retained by the Claire Ingram Trust. We've completed our audit of the household expenses for the last 3 months." My father moved to the doorway. Valerie's face went a sickly, translucent white. According to the bank records, 3 separate utility payments were made from the minor's checking account. These payments totaled $4,000 and were used to pay down a Visa card in Valerie Ingram's name. "It was for the groceries," Valerie shouted, "for her food." "The Visa statements show the charges were made at a high-end salon and a boutique in Richmond," Mr. Holloway added, his voice clinical and cold. Drayton looked at Valerie over the rim of her glasses. "In the state of Virginia, this is called conversion of funds. It's a felony. However, my client is prepared to offer a settlement." This was the trap my mother had mentioned in her notes. Always give them a way out that costs them their pride. "Here is the deal," Drayton said. Richard, you will sign a voluntary termination of any claim to the estate. Valerie, you will sign an affidavit admitting to the unauthorized inquiries at the bank. In exchange, the trust will not file criminal charges for the credit card conversion. You're blackmailing me, Valerie gasped. No, I'm giving you a receipt for your behavior. Sign the papers and you can spend the rest of your life telling people in Grover whatever lie you want. Don't sign them and you can tell your story to a public defender. The room was silent for a long time. I watched Valerie look at the papers, then at the gaming nook she'd built for Kyle. She realized the dream was over. The Audi was going back. The house was going back. The only thing she had left was her freedom, and it was sitting on the end of a fountain pen. She grabbed the pen and signed. She didn't look at me. She signed it with a jagged, angry scrawl that ripped through the top sheet. "Get out," she whispered. "Take the brat and get out of my house." "With pleasure," Drayton said. My father stood by the door as I carried my last crate out to the car. He looked like he wanted to say something, but the words were buried under 6 years of cowardice. "I'll be at June's for a few days, Morgan, if you want to talk." "I'm going to my dorm on Saturday, Dad. I think I've done enough talking for one lifetime." I got into the car. I looked back at the house, the 3-bedroom dream that had become a prison. I saw Valerie standing in the window, her silhouette dark against the afternoon sun. She was alone in a house she couldn't afford, surrounded by furniture she'd stolen, waiting for a future that was never coming. My mother's $400,000 was safe. Her legacy was intact. And as we pulled away from the curb, I realized for the first time in months, I didn't need to look behind my shoulder. The final notification hadn't just been a legal document, it had been my certificate of release. The house on Sycamore Drive was quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a home at rest, but the hollow, ringing silence of a shipwreck after the waves have stopped crashing. Valerie had taken the kids to her mother's, leaving behind nothing but the scent of expensive perfume and a stack of past due notices on the marble island. My father, Richard, was sitting on the floor of the empty garage. He wasn't looking at the lawnmower or the boxes. He was looking at the second cream-colored envelope, the one Patricia Drayton had handed him as she walked out. I stood in the doorway, my suitcases already loaded into the car. I should have just left. I should have let him sit in the dark. But there was one last thing my mother had asked of me in her notes. Make sure he reads the second one, Morgan. The first was for the man he became. The second is for the man I loved. Read it, Dad, I whispered. He didn't look up. He just tore the seal with a trembling thumb. I leaned against the doorframe, watching the man who had let my mother die alone finally face the woman he'd tried to forget. The letter wasn't on a legal pad. It was on the flowered stationery she used for her thank you cards. Richard, the letter began, if you're reading this, it means Valerie has already asked for the money. It means you've already felt the weight of her disappointment when you couldn't give it to her. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I had to make you the villain in your own house to save our daughter. My father made a sound, a choked, jagged sob. I remember the day we bought this house. I remember you carrying Morgan through the front door and telling her she'd always have a roof over her head. You meant it then. I know you did. But Richard, you were always afraid of the storm. You were always looking for someone to tell you the clouds weren't coming. He slumped against the brick wall, the paper shaking in his hand. Valerie was your umbrella. She told you what you wanted to hear. She told you that leaving us wasn't a betrayal. It was a new beginning. And because you hate the rain, Richard, you believed her. You let her rewrite my life until I was just a bitter ex-wife and Morgan was just a burden. But here is the truth. I didn't set up the trust to punish you. I set it up because I knew that without it, Valerie would devour you. I didn't just build a wall for Morgan, Richard. I built a mirror for you. My father dropped the letter. He put his face in his hands and he finally broke. He didn't cry like a man who had lost a house. He cried like a man who realized he'd spent 6 years throwing away the only thing that was real. She knew, he choked out, his voice raw. She knew I wouldn't have the spine to say no to Valerie. She knew I'd let them put you in a closet, Morgan. She knew me better than I knew myself. She loved you, Dad, my own voice wavering. That's why it hurts. She didn't expect you to be a hero. She just expected you to be a father. And when you couldn't do that, she did it for you. I walked over and picked up the letter. I folded it neatly and placed it back in his lap. The trust stays as it is. I'm going to college in the fall. I'm taking the money for my tuition and my books. The rest, that stays in the vault until I'm 25, just like she wanted. I don't want the money, Morgan, he whispered. His eyes were clear for the first time in years, the fog of Valerie's manipulation finally lifted by the cold splash of the truth. I know, Dad.
I didn't hug him. I wasn't ready for that. But I didn't leave him with a curse either. I left him with the letter. It was the only thing of my mother's he had left, and it was the heaviest thing he'd ever have to carry. I walked out of the garage. Aunt June was waiting by the car, the engine idling. The sun was setting over Grover, casting long golden shadows across the lawns. "Is he okay?" June asked. "He's awake. That's a start." As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the storage closet window. It was dark. The house was a shell. Valerie was gone. The greed was gone. All that was left was a man on a concrete floor reading a letter from a woman who loved him enough to tell him the truth when he was too weak to hear it. My mother's $400,000 was safe, but as I rubbed the silver locket on my wrist, I realized the real inheritance was the spine she gave me. She taught me that you don't have to raise your voice to win a war. You just have to be the one who keeps the receipts. The Tuesday she left was the worst day of my life, but today was the day I finally became Morgan Lowell Ingram. The day I turned 18, there was no party, no cake from Valerie, no half-hearted text from Kyle. Instead, I woke up in my dorm room at VCU in Richmond. It was a tiny space, 8 by 12, with a bunk bed and a desk that had seen better days, but it was the most magnificent kingdom I'd ever ruled. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the clock click over to 10 a.m. My phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Deposit received $50,000. The first release, the floor. I didn't buy a car. I didn't go on a shopping spree. I walked down to the campus registrar and paid my tuition for the next 2 years in full. Then I went to the bookstore and bought every single one of the heavy English literature textbooks I'd need for my major. I was 18, I was a student, and for the first time in my life, I didn't owe a single person an explanation for my existence. Patricia Drayton called me that afternoon. "Happy birthday, Morgan. The transfer went through?" "It did. Thank you, Patricia, for everything." "Don't thank me," she said, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. "Thank the teacher. She's the one who graded this final exam 2 years ago. By the way, the house in Grover, the foreclosure was finalized yesterday." "And Valerie?" I asked. "She's in a 2-bedroom apartment in Richmond now, working as a dental receptionist. I hear she's still telling everyone she's the victim of a bitter dead woman's ghost." I looked out my window at the Richmond skyline. I felt a flicker of pity for Briana and Kyle caught in the wake of their mother's greed, but I also knew they were working now, earning their own way. Maybe, just maybe, my mother's wall had taught them how to build one of their own. "And my father?" I asked. "He's still in the apartment above the hardware store," Drayton said. "He's working overtime at the mill. He sends a check to the firm every month, $500. He says it's interest on the money Valerie took from your account. He wants it added back to the trust." I sat with that for a moment. $500 a month on a mill worker's salary? That's a lot of lonely nights. "Keep it," I said. "Put it toward the scholarship fund we talked about." That was the final piece of the legacy. Any interest from the $400,000 would go toward a small grant for local kids in Grover who had lost a parent. We called it the Claire Ingram Stay Strong Fund. My father sent me a letter a week later. No excuses this time, just a photo of a cardinal sitting on a fence post. "Your mom always said these were a sign that someone was watching over you. I saw this today and thought of you. Good luck with finals, Dad." I didn't write back. Not yet. I'm still not ready, but I pinned the photo to my bulletin board right next to my mom's portrait. Let's be real for a second. Some people will watch this and say I was cold. They'll say I should have forgiven my family because blood is thicker than water. But blood isn't a contract, and family isn't a license to steal someone's future just because you're too lazy to build your own. My mother, Claire Ingram, was a teacher. She taught me that words have power, that signatures are sacred, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a person is to let them face the consequences of their own choices. She left me $400,000, yes, but the real gift was the $0 she left for the people who didn't respect her. She taught me that no is a complete sentence, and she taught me that a fortress is only a prison if you're the one trying to break in. If you're the one inside, it's a home. If you're sitting at a table tonight where people are looking at you like an ATM, if your parents are telling you that you're selfish for protecting what's yours, I want you to remember my mother. It is okay to build a wall. It is okay to keep the receipts, and it is absolutely okay to walk away from a house that doesn't feel like a home. My name is Morgan Ingram. I'm 18 years old. I'm wearing my mother's bracelet, and I am exactly where she wanted me to be, free. That's my story. If it gave you the spine to say no to a toxic situation, then my mother is still teaching, even now. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to protect your peace from your own family. I read every single one of them. And if you want to see another story of a woman who took her power back, check the link in the description. Thanks for staying until the end of the file. I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe Family Files for more.